Okay, folks, in this lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to learn how to make a South Park character style walk. So we're going to use the South Park style. The content maybe not the most the most appropriate, but it is a really, really simplistic animation style, which is why I like it for what we're doing. So you'll notice here I've got a couple examples on this website where the characters are walking, and you'll notice one of the things that when they're walking, they kind of bounce. There's no smooth motion. They don't glide, they just bounce and kind of either rotate. You'll notice here side to side, they bounce kind of back and forth, they wobble back and forth. So we're not going to use any gliding in this animation. So without further ado, let's get right to it. The first thing we're going to want to do in Animate is we're going to want to create a new file. And we're just going to use that default 720p, so 1280 by 720 and 24 frames per second. Now we're going to need to bring in a character to obviously make it move. So you've got a couple different choices here. Number one, if you have one already created, you can obviously use that one. You could also go to Google and do a website search or do a search, sorry, for a South Park character generator. And the first two that pop up here are my favorites. They work really well, provided that they're still active at the time of this tutorial. But please realize that a couple different things. Number one, you don't want to include any backgrounds because Animate won't be able to separate the two. We want just the avatar, just the character. And number two, because it is South Park, they do include some objects and slang, slogans and whatnot that are not the most appropriate for a school environment. So please make sure that you do not include those in anything that you do. So the third option is you can use the one that has been provided for you. So I've given you an Adobe Illustrator version of a character, which you are welcome to use, which you should have access to if you found your way to this tutorial. So I'm going to just simply click File, Import to Stage, which means bring it right into my movie. And I'm going to click that Adobe Illustrator file. You can see .ai, so SP character setup walk. And I'm going to open that. And because it's an Adobe Illustrator file, it's going to say, hey, I noticed that there's a bunch of layers here. This you will not see if you're bringing in just a simple image. So it's saying you have a bunch of Illustrator layers. What do you want to do with them? Well, because we're just going to get the character to move, we'll do more advanced stuff later on in our lessons. But for now, we're going to just make it a single animate layer. So squish everything down into one layer. And you'll see there's our characters right there. And we still have access to all the vector pieces that were available in Illustrator, but it's squished down into one layer. So that just makes life a little bit easier for us. So the next thing that we're going to do is we need to make sure that this is a symbol because we want Animate to move it for us. Remember, it has to be on its own layer, which it is. It also needs to be a symbol. So by simply clicking Modify, Convert to Symbol, or F8, making sure all the pieces of your character are selected, and either Modify, Convert to Symbol, or F8, we're going to convert this into a symbol. We'll give it the name character. And we're going to make sure that it's a graphic symbol. So that's going to be important for this one. And we're going to click OK. Now this is an object that Animate can move for us, which is great. The next thing is, you'll notice in those lessons or that website that I showed you earlier, if I go back to it really quickly, they kind of wobble based on their feet, where their feet are at. But you'll see the way that we have our characters set up is that they rotate based on the nose, which is a little bit weird. So we don't want that. We want to move that transform point right there. So if it's not already at the bottom, grab your free transform tool, grab that transform point and drag it down to the bottom in the middle of your character's feet. And then that way, when you rotate it, it looks a little bit, it looks right, looks better. We're going to now take our character and we're going to move it off to the left because we're going to have this character walk across the screen. So actually, I'm going to keep it on the screen. We'll keep it on the screen. And we're going to say it's going to take him maybe 2 seconds or 3 seconds. Let's go with 2 seconds. So 48 frames to get from one side of the screen to the other. So with our first keyframe made on frame 1, we just now have to insert a keyframe on frame 48. So by pressing F6 on your keyboard, for those of you who like shortcuts, or you could right-click, insert keyframe. By now, you should know all the different ways to insert a keyframe. Now we've got 2 keyframes, and on the second keyframe, we want to move our character all the way over to the right side of the screen. So now it should just blip over there. We're going to get animate to move the character across the screen for us. So in between both keyframes, by simply create classic tween, so I right click anywhere in between those 2 frames and choose create classic tween, the character will now move across the screen. So it slides. Now this is great if the character was sliding on ice or, just on a skateboard or something, but that's not the case. We want the character to walk. And you'll remember from the examples that you saw earlier, the characters don't glide into places. So I can't just put keyframes in and rotate them because the character will glide. So if I was to take a keyframe and put it here and rotate the character, it's going to glide. You see how it kind of glides in that position? But that's not the way South Park characters move. They kind of just wobble. They blip really quickly. So I'm going to convert this from a tween to a frame-by-frame animation. And you do that by first selecting all of your frames. So the way I would do that is I would click the first frame, hold Shift, and click the last frame. So now they're all selected. I would right-click anywhere on that selection, and I would choose Convert to Keyframes. You're not going to notice a difference yet, but you'll see that now each one of these frames can be manipulated. So I can go to frame 2 now, and with my transform tool, I might rotate my character a little bit and raise him up just a little bit. And then maybe the character comes back down, and then I'll take the character here and rotate a little bit, raise the character up a little bit. I'll come back to this one. Maybe I'll rotate the character forward a little bit, just raise it a little bit. And you'll see that the character now is getting a little bit of a South Park walk style to them. And you would just continue on changing your keyframes. Now, the one thing you want to make sure you do as you do this, so if I was going to rotate this one, you don't want to rotate and move the character to the right, because if you do, that is going to mess up your timing. You want to make sure that you're moving your character up, down, maybe just slightly left or right, but not so much that it's going to overlap its next position. And then you would just continue doing that all the way through, changing all of your keyframes so that you will get your character walking across the screen. And that is how you can get a South Park style walk to your character.